Hey, what is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Inforium, a show about productivity, personal finance, business, but not about overthinking. Not unlike my friend Ali Abdal's podcast, Not Overthinking. Check that out and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Anyway, what's up, Martin?
I'm just chilling in this basement, recording an episode of the Inforium.
It is a pretty cool basement. Not even my mom's basement, it's my basement.
Yeah.
Nah, it's my landlord's basement.
I wish I could record in my mom's basement.
I mean, you could. You literally could do that. There is a sequence of steps you could follow to arrive at that destination.
All right.
Okay,
I am not going to... episode's live from my mom's basement.
There you go. Actually, I used to follow a podcast, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name right now. Oh, Stacking Benjamins. And they always would say that they were recording live from mom's basement. I'm pretty sure they weren't actually.
It's probably just the name of their office. You put it on the paperwork.
That's true, yeah. Mom's Basement LLC.
Yeah.
I guarantee you
someone
that
has it.
That must exist.
Certainly.
Okay, I'm not going to wear these headphones the whole time. I just wanted to use these to monitor because I'm gonna be honest. I got a little lax with the podcast tech setup over the past forever.
Oh no.
Well, the pandemic hit, and we were like, I guess we're gonna not be in the studio anymore. We're gonna do Skype, and that was a thing. And then we got back in the studio, and I think last episode went well, but we have a more unified set now. We've got
fair.
Power, backup, redundancy, cameras, all the things.
I like things.
Yeah.
Also stuff.
I like things and also stuff. So, order of business here, I guess. This is an episode of the Inforium in which we are going to be covering some reader questions near the end. This is something that I hope to do in episodes that aren't ridiculously long.
Yeah.
Like the last one. I did not realize that episode was an hour and 40 minutes until Anna had finished editing it.
That we had sat there for that long. I had no idea. But that episode was also basically a collection of related reader or listener questions.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily need to have stacked extras on top of it.
And it's kind of a reflection, that episode and then this episode is kind of a reflection of the direction that I'm sort of taking more seriously on my YouTube channel now, where I know that I'm going to have some videos that are just like half an hour long info dumps, like the Make Money Online video that was 25 minutes long. And then there are going to be some videos that are just like the more stylish video essay things that sort of just dwell on one more philosophical topic. And, that's kind of, I think it's a good interplay to have both. So here on the Inforium, sometimes we're going to get inspired to do an episode that's like how to buy a house or how to, buy a car that's fit for racing around the track. We're not going to do that episode.
Yeah, I don't know the answers.
But there's going to be super detailed episodes, and then there's going to be some episodes that are just a bit chiller. And what I want to do with those episodes is have reader questions. So to the dear listeners hanging out with us now, send us your reader questions. Guess what? We just created an Instagram for the Inforium. It's at the Inforium. You can follow it.
I'm surprised
there's a
that
Twitter
is
as
the
well.
account name. Weird.
Right?
Yeah, it's also on Twitter.
There's a Twitter as well. I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do with it. Possibly do clips
Probably
again.
Just like a bunch of selfies.
Or just a bunch of selfies.
All the time.
We're going to do cute selfies.
Daily selfies.
Follow for the daily selfies.
Yeah.
But also, if you want to send us questions, we may end up posting stories there. And then, of course, I'm just going to use my personal account as well, which is at Tom Frankly. There are more followers there.
That's true.
So we get more questions.
That's very true.
Yeah. And I think we got a few from a story I posted a while ago that we'll be tackling today. But what are we talking about before we get into those questions?
Today, I was thinking that I wanted to talk about a thought that I thought. What do you think?
Did it hurt?
Yeah. So I was thinking about happiness, short and long-term happiness, as I often do. Because I'm, kind of a problem solver kind of person. So I think I haven't been having a great day too many days in a row. Why? And then I immediately want to do something about it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand that feeling. But I came across the thought that, so obviously you can help your happiness either by removing negative things or by adding positive things. But I've been starting to think that removing negative things actually might be more important in the long run. And that thought interested me. So wanted to talk about it. I got some ideas as to why that might be true.
Yeah.
And then some ideas as to what one might do with that information if it is true, even if it's just on a personal basis. Maybe for some people it's true and some people it's not. But
This makes me think of the trolley problem.
Yeah.
I swear, like it's gonna tie together. In philosophy, there's this classic
We're going to
problem.
kill people today with a trolley.
Yes. In philosophy, there's this classic problem called the trolley problem, where you're presented with this terrible scenario. You are standing next to the lever that can switch the tracks on which a trolley is going to go. Right? The trolley is currently heading towards 5 people who, for some reason, are completely oblivious and will be hit and killed by this trolley if you do nothing. But you can pull the lever and switch the tracks so the trolley makes a turn and hits one person who's standing on the other tracks. So you can make an active decision to cause the death of one person, but save 5 people in doing that. And there's a variation of this problem. Whereas the variation is you're standing on the bridge on which the trolley goes under, and there's a person who you could push onto the tracks, which would stop the trolley or slow it enough for all 5 people to get off. And the interesting thing is, like, more people will choose to pull the lever than push the person, even though the outcome is the same. You're making an active decision that will cause the death of one person to save 5, but most people don't want to get their hands dirty.
Well, no.
So
You got the COVID.
It's
you gotta
like-
wash them.
it's like, an equivalent thing. And this is really similar to answers I've gotten when I've asked people like, hey, if I told you I could hook you up to a simulation that would cause pleasure forever, like everything would be awesome, all your wildest dreams, but it's a simulation, would you do it? And most people are like, no, I wouldn't do that. I want to live in the real world. But if I say, all right, assume that your life now is a simulation, would you choose to wake up? And a lot of people are like, I kind of like it. I would stay. There's like this interesting status
there's a
quo,
weird
right?
friction that you're trying to avoid. You don't want to.
Yeah. So getting back to your hypothesis, to remove negative things from your life is more important for happiness than to add things that make you happier. It just kind of reminds me of questions like, hey, you get these stupid questions in high school. Would you eat a cactus for $100? Or like how much would I have to pay you to eat a cactus with the needles?
Yeah, the answer is I wouldn't do that
Right.
for any amount of money.
No amount of money.
But that's because
$1 million.
they're needles, and I think I might die.
Let's assume that
If we're talking about
like,
friction, I think needles in my throat is a pretty good amount of friction.
let's assume you're like LA Beast,
I don't
who's
know.
like this
Who is
YouTuber
this?
who did
I
eat
don't
a
watch
cactus.
YouTube. I don't know these people.
I haven't seen a whole lot of LA Beast recently, but he did eat a cactus.
Is it a human or a beast?
I don't know.
Okay.
Depends on which fan fiction site you're reading.
I just don't. I think I'm a bad sample because there are a lot of things where it's like, do this obnoxious thing for money, and I just be like, I don't really care about money that much, man.
Mm-hmm. I just find it fascinating because all these scenarios, like a lot of people will say, yes, I would do this thing that's very unpleasant for X amount of money, which is essentially saying I would like to add something negative to my life in order to add
For
something
money.
positive to my life. It's a little different because, eating a cactus, it would be...
It's like a one-time thing.
It would
if
be
you
a
can
one-time
get it
thing,
done.
but it's like, all right, well, what if, you could easily rephrase the question. Like, would you give up your left arm for X amount of money? I would not, There's no amount of money that would let me do that. But I
Yeah,
think if you asked a
I don't
certain...
think I'd go
I think
for
if you
that.
asked people and you came up with a scenario where it's like, this would be a long-term consequence and it would suck, but you would get this benefit, some people would say yes. Which is interesting. I think that we heavily weight the value that something we're going to gain is going to add to our life in terms of happiness, and
Yeah.
it is not true.
Like, yeah, it feels like that might be true, but I'm coming more and more to the realization that even with small short-term things where maybe it didn't feel already obvious, because the losing your arm for money thing seems kind of obvious, but even for smaller things, I just think removing the negatives might be more important.
Yeah.
And-
maybe not losing your arm. Every morning you
Yeah.
open your front door and someone slaps you in the face, but you get like $10,000 a month for this.
That would be obnoxious.
But you're thinking about it now.
That's because that's
You're like,
obnoxious,
this
and
isn't
also I
that
pictured
bad.
it, but like I pictured there's a swarm of angry bees every morning
Oh, I really don't like that one.
that shows up. If you're allergic to bees, that's cured in order for you to endure this.
Okay. So it's just hell.
It's a cure, but it's curing you to make things worse for you.
Yeah.
It's one of those. But yeah, there are a bunch of weird questions there, and I just think the way happiness works for us ends up being a little different than we might have assumed.
Yeah.
Because all of those questions just ask about money, which is something that people will do weird things for and then realize. But the funny thing is that past a certain point, the money is statistically shown not to help you. So like that at a certain point,
wasn't
it stops mattering as much.
Wasn't the classic study like $75,000 a year is the point at which
I think
money
that's what I had heard for the classic study. I don't know other details. I would assume that you're not heavily in debt at that point, because if you're in like debt, sure, you might be like, but I want to make until I cure the debt.
I would assume it's assuming
just
no
lifestyle,
debt other than like a mortgage.
And of course, I assume the question is, where is that? Because I know nowadays that's like nothing.
I imagine that was averaged
in like San Francisco. That number would be like
You'd be on the street.
I'm sure that you would need more money than that in San Francisco.
You wouldn't be on the street, but you would be renting an apartment
you'd have
with
like six
many
roommates.
other people.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people do.
The moral of that story is there is a point at which your happiness kind of stops going up, obviously, with added positives.
Yeah.
At least in the form of money, but I would surmise in the form of other things.
Okay.
So the reason that one of these things, I guess, would be the hedonic treadmill, since we're talking about the money. Because with the hedonic treadmill, we have basically a baseline level of happiness that we hover around on a day-to-day basis, and almost no long-term changes will change that permanently. Both positive and negative if it's a very long-term change that you can adapt to. So like if you did lose your arm, you would eventually adapt to it. They had done studies where people who had suddenly gained a lot of money eventually adapted to it and back to their old happiness levels. But the same thing for people who had suffered like spinal cord injuries. Like obviously the trauma would be terrible at first, but eventually both groups could be expected and themselves expected to eventually be kind of back where they were.
Yeah.
But so the hedonic treadmill right there takes care of a lot of the positives that people are seeking. An increased amount of money is a long-term thing. You will adapt to it. But a negative that I could remove that would maybe get me money, imagine your daily commute. It might seem, if you're getting a new house, a new job, you're really excited about it, you're going to make a bunch of money, but you need to do a 40-minute commute. Now, if you're in the Midwest, that may not sound bad, so make it a 2-hour commute or something. Yeah, each way. Make it worse for the Midwest, because everybody there drives more.
What kind of commute are we talking about? Because 40 minutes on backcountry roads is very different than 40 minutes in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Because you have to see this as an inconvenience when you take it, because you'll think, well, I can handle it, right? Because I'm going to make more money, and it'll all shake out in the end.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen is that through the hedonic treadmill, the money you will get used to, but that daily thing, that's not really something you adapt to because it's not a long-term condition. It's a repetitive, short-term condition.
Yep.
Each day you get to be annoyed by this, and each day that money becomes slightly less exciting than it was to begin with. But the drive is still annoying, and I would say in my experience, it gets more annoying.
It does.
Over time.
Yeah, it's not really something that, at least in my case, you adapt to.
I think it's just because you get a break from it. You stop driving for the night and you're like, oh, at least I'm not driving. And then you do it again. It's repetitive, and that's what makes it fresh. If you were constantly driving, maybe if you were a trucker, you would be used to it. You'd be like, that's because this is my constant condition.
I should ask my brother.
That would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I would like to know that. Personally, and maybe you could make the argument that I was getting a refresh every day. But when I was a cashier as a teenager, like that job made me unhappy when I was there. I don't know if I was like unhappy all the time, but in the summers I would do 8 hours a day, and it was just terrible.
It was freshly unhappy for you, essentially. But you can go home from that job. Whereas if you get a spinal cord injury, you can't go home from it and then expect to have it again tomorrow morning. Yeah. Because if that were to happen, you wouldn't adapt to it. You would. I mean, isn't that why all the classic like birds continuously pecking at whoever's being tortured? A lot of those like old hellish stories are things that happen to you repetitively, but you have to be allowed to recover from it so that it doesn't get boring.
Yep. So yeah, maybe if I worked 24 hours a day as a cashier, I would accept my fate.
Eventually, you would just be like, "This is it."
This is life.
Yeah. I mean, you'd probably go numb, but
Yeah, I would. Not
it
wanna
wouldn't
do
be
that.
freshly, excitingly bad. So on top of this, though, I think our brains already have an inconvenient way of focusing on negatives,
Yes.
and I think that
Good
this
survival
is
mechanism.
it's very useful.
Not great when it's like, oh, I just realized, like, I thought about how when I was in 8th grade, I did this really embarrassing thing once, and now I feel really bad.
Yeah, that's not that useful. But if you're like, look, yummy berries, surrounded by alligators, but berries are good, right? So I should still go for it. And the negative does outweigh the positive. I mean, if you scroll through 10 YouTube comments and you see a bad one, you will likely remember that the rest of the day and not
yeah.
the 10 neutral to positive ones surrounding it.
Yep.
Just definitely. And like they did relationship studies, long-term marriages decades ago were more likely to last if they had at least 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative, because the negative stands out and you get used to the positives. You're like, yeah, I know that you do nice things for me. I'm used to that.
Yeah.
But we fought the other day and I didn't think that was going to happen, so it sticks out.
I would also argue, and maybe that study took this into account, but I doubt it. I would argue that what we consider a positive interaction does not exceed expectations that the other person has of us in the same way that a negative interaction violates those expectations.
Yeah.
If I wake up and I give Anna a kiss in the morning, or I say I love you, like, I should do these things.
You gross.
But you gross, there's cooties. She kind of expects it. You
yeah.
know?
Well, this
If
is
I
like
don't
the
do
money
it-
thing, right? Like that's the raise.
Yeah.
You get a kiss every morning. But
know.
eventually you're like, yeah, but like,
Now, if I create like a huge scavenger hunt with all these puzzles and
what
stuff,
about second kiss?
ooh, that's true. I could do too. But like I think the things that are emotionally charged to the same level that a negative event would be, they're pretty few and far between. So it's almost like Stephen Covey had this concept called the emotional bank account, where you're making withdrawals and you're making deposits, and you make more deposits than withdrawals because we tend to dwell on the withdrawals.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair.
So
Decent analogy.
yeah, I think like you have to have very few negative interactions compared to your positive ones, because really where we should classify those positive ones when we're making this comparison is those are status quo interactions. Or maybe you're doing something nice, a little bit above the status quo, but it's nothing compared to the emotions that are brought about when we violate other people's expectations in a bad way.
Yeah.
Betrayal, lying to people, failing on our obligations, those kinds of things, like, they stand out.
Yeah, and obviously we're hoping for the status quo to at least be neutral, if not positive.
Yeah.
Because in a negative
Hopefully it's
status
good.
quo environment, you might adapt to it.
Yeah.
But in that case, the strategy of removing negatives would, in fact, still probably be more important than adding any positives on top. But
It was interesting. I was watching a Veritasium video, and the title, I think, was like, is success luck or hard work? And there was a concept he explained in the video where if you get 2 people and you ask them each, like, how much would you say you contribute to this relationship or to the work that's done here, or like you get a team who finished a project and you ask every single one of them, how much did you contribute? You add up the percentages, it's always over 100. It's like 140 usually. So everyone perceives that they are doing more good and putting in more effort than they probably are, which has some very interesting implications for the way that I remember group projects in college and high school. Because unless I'm some sort of statistical anomaly, my belief that half the time my group members did nothing is probably at least somewhat false.
I know for sure that there are some group projects where that answer was false for me. And I didn't do nothing. I was just...
Yeah.
I was no longer the obvious one doing all the work sometimes. But
There were
yeah,
definitely
maybe...
some group projects where like there was one person who was just dead weight.
But like everybody hates the group projects though, right?
Yeah.
So that's a strong point there. It's very interesting because everybody's like, I hate group projects. Nobody else does the work.
Yep.
Well, someone's
doing the work.
somebody's actually not doing it, and it must be one of you complainers.
Yeah, and there's this, I don't know. we get to experience all the work we put in.
Yeah,
We
so it
experience the
seems
boredom, we experience
more
the
obnoxious.
slog, we experience the difficulty, we experience the discoveries. We don't experience any of that with other people. It's always interesting to me, like watching people lift weights, because I'm like, cerebrally, I know that's really heavy and it must be very challenging, but I'm not feeling anything. So it just looks like it's going up. It's like, wow, it's very easy for them.
Yeah, that's
know?
how like everything looks. And Ashley always gets mad at me because I legit didn't understand. But when we went rock climbing, I was like, and this was an honest question. It wasn't because I thought it was easy, but I was like, but which part is supposed to be hard? And that sounds like what I'm saying is that looks easy. I could do it. But
Yeah.
I just didn't actually know because I was like, is the grip weirdly strong? Is it about navigating? That's it. For me,
Yeah.
it turns out it was the looking down and being spooked about the heights. That was the hardest part.
That will do it.
But at first, I was just confused because I knew there'd be a hidden challenge that isn't obvious when you watch it.
Yeah. What do they call it? Like, well, so you were aware of it, but
I knew
that's
that I
the,
would be missing something,
That's
basically.
the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
Oh,
Where
yeah,
like
yeah.
people are overconfident in their intelligence because they don't even know what they don't know.
Yeah,
Is it
I
the name
like
for
to
that?
preempt that by assuming that I don't know something.
Yeah.
And I was asking, what is that thing? But it definitely sounded like I was saying, that doesn't look hard.
It looks so easy. You just
put your hand
climb.
on the thing, you grab it, you move up.
Yeah.
It's not like, duh. I can go up.
There was a line in that Alex Honnold documentary. What is it called? It's like where he climbs the big Yosemite wall. I can't think of it right now. Everyone listening to this knows what it's called. But, there's a line from one of the filmmakers because he was, free solo. That's what it's called. He's going to free solo this El Cap, this gigantic wall. And the filmmaker was like, people who don't rock climb don't really understand why what he's doing is so hard and terrifying. People who know what they're doing are terrified at what he's going to attempt.
Because they think they're about to watch a snuff film.
Exactly.
essentially.
I mean, the filmmakers were so scared. Number one, that they were going to watch him die while filming. Number two, that they were going to do something to distract him somehow, throw his
Ooh.
groove off, and
Ooh,
cause it.
that would feel bad.
So, yeah, there was like this whole section of the film where they're like, do we want to do this? Like, can we film this ethically? Like, what if we do something that messes it up?
I don't even
Yeah.
like watching normal rock climbers out on the mountains. People were watching them, and I was like, I just want to keep walking because if I watch and they fall, I'll never forget it ever. So I would rather just not even see this impressive feat right now, just in case.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's totally fair. But yeah, I think we tend to perceive our own efforts as greater than they really are in terms of how they contribute to the whole. So in relationships, we probably feel like, I contribute so much. Why is she getting on me about this one stupid little thing I did? And it's like, you didn't contribute as much as you thought you did.
Yeah, you're probably
You know?
overestimating yourself or remembering good times.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the commute thing, actually, because one interesting thing I saw, Ashley had shown me, there was a Hank Green video on the YouTubes, if you've heard of it.
I
And
think I've heard of that website.
he was talking about happiness-related effects of a daily commute because they have statistically shown, and I believe repetitively, that removing a commute can be way more important for your happiness than a lot of other things. And in this particular study, freeing up an hour-long commute gave the same happiness gains, which I assume was self-reported happiness, but it gave the same gains, giving up an hour-long commute every day, as going from getting paid $60,000 a year to $100,000. But many people, if offered a $40,000 raise, which sounds pretty, especially at $60,000, that's almost a 100% raise.
Yeah.
You would be like, "What? I'm gonna do that. An hour-long commute, no big deal." But the happiness gains were the same. So in the end, that money would kind of be a wash.
I wonder what the methodology behind that was. Did they just like track a ton of people who got big raises and had them rate their happiness
what I
over
would
time, or
assume
what?
is rated happiness over time would be
Okay.
my guess. But
And I imagine
didn't
losing that commute is a very quick
dig
thing
too far into
versus
it because
you're probably not getting a 40 grand raise immediately. It's like over time. So it's like the boiling frog thing almost for them.
yeah. But it's pretty interesting to think that even substantial amounts of money may not be worth as much because you just get used to the money. You know, you buy a more expensive car. Now you have more expensive payments.
Yep.
That money finds its way to disappear into your new lifestyle. And now you're stressed out because if you make any less money, you can't afford your lifestyle anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, it becomes a sort of trap. So that positive, ironically, comes with hidden negatives. But that commute is just a negative. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
you can listen to the College Info Geek podcast
You could.
or the Emporium now, but
There's a lot more
You're
College
eventually
Info
going to
Geek
be
podcasts.
sick about the traffic. You're gonna get sick of it, unless you're the kind of person that loves traffic. I don't know that person, but
I'm imagining like those people. I've only seen this in California. Where, like you're driving on the highway, and you look over, just glance real quick, and the person driving next to you is just staring at you. I've seen this multiple times in LA.
I
don't think I've seen it here in Denver.
I did not experience that. Although, in all fairness, I've only driven in LA for like 2 or 3 days.
I've had to do a decent amount of driving in LA.
Yeah,
That city is huge. You think that there is a long commute here in Denver? LA laughs at Denver. I had to get over to near Huntington Beach, I think, for some YouTube event. And we were in Yorba Linda, which is, if you look at the map and you look at the sprawl that is LA, Yorba Linda is not even near close to the eastern edge of the sprawl. It's like in the middle, and it still took me 2 full hours to get just there that way. And then going back, I think I waited till the traffic had died down. It took me like an hour and a half. But still,
I can see
Are
how
there
on a
people-
daily basis you'd just be really mad. I can't even imagine not being mad at that.
are there people driving 2 hours a day each way?
Very possible.
I bet you we're probably, given this is a podcast, we're probably going to get people saying like, yep, that's how I do it.
Yeah, there's gonna be somebody who's like 2 hours, baby. I do 4.
But to your point about like buying things and upgrading your lifestyle being a trap, I'd bet you that fewer people would give up $40,000 in income to remove their commute
yeah.
than would add the commute to get $40,000 in income.
Yeah, because you wouldn't think that it would make a big deal, but all the positives become the status quo,
Yep.
and it sort of evens out.
It's like it's a terrible part of human nature, but it's also the beauty of human nature that the moment we solve a problem or gain something, we've like uncovered 5 smaller problems.
Yeah.
They call it the exploration exploitation loop. It's part of the reason that human beings have been so successful, because like if you built a robot, it's like, hey, go exploit that resource. It would do that, but it wouldn't have an innate drive to like to get curious and like start exploring other things. Just like I exploit the resource as efficiently as possible. That's it.
Yeah.
We're like exploit the resource, but wait, now, I got the cool car. I kind of want to put a cool exhaust on it now, and I want to get like LEDs underneath, and I want TVs as mud flaps. You know?
We're kind of hobbyists
Standard-
at finding imperfections,
Yeah.
which is obviously a decent way to stay kind of unhappy, but also to invent many things.
Yeah, like the average person in college or early career living in like an apartment with roommates, they will look at a 50-year-old married couple bickering over the wrought iron design on their side yard posts in the fence, and they're like, that's alien to me. How could one care at all? And yet, like 30 years from now, I guarantee you, like 75% of you will have had that argument and will have cared very deeply about wrought iron design at your house.
Yeah. Life is really about like solving problems more than the solution to the problems.
Yeah.
And because of that, we will always find more problems to solve, or
Yep.
we will resign ourselves to feeling somewhat empty, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's just part of the situation we're in.
Yeah, I think there are ways to take advantage of that. You know, like choose like, hey, maybe I can solve other people's problems for a while.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people,
Yeah.
they will
Well,
end up finding
you
out.
go to charity work, you go to stuff like that, and you start feeling purpose again. This helps a lot of people because of that.
Or, you know,
somewhat
a
of a
lot
side
of what's
tip,
been discovered
but-
about like giving dogs to prisoners. You know, they like start to feel like, oh, I have something I have to care for now.
I'd rather give prisoners to dogs, and the dogs have to be the warden. Like
That was really dark for a
You're
second.
the dog's prisoner.
Okay.
What happens? I don't know.
Dog warden.
Yeah. This sounds like an Air Bud movie, but like a really sad one.
Prison bud. Oh my God.
Would I watch that one? Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah, I probably would. It's like Ernest Goes to Jail
Yeah,
with dogs.
It's very weird. Anyway, outside of Airbud prisoner side movies,
I wonder if this is why people are like more passionate about dogs in general than cats.
because they make good wardens.
Yes. No, I think a cat would make a better prison warden than a dog. Maybe. I don't know. Cats don't care very much.
I don't think
You
the
have to
cat
make
would
them
care.
care.
It'd just be like, I don't really care if you're escaping.
I don't know.
Eh.
You got to build a device that like puts a laser pointer on the escapee, so then the cat cares.
We'll pitch this movie later to someone.
This week's episode of our show is brought to you by our friends over at Skillshare, which is an online learning library full of thousands of classes you can use to boost your skills, your creativity, and even your career prospects. They've got classes in tons of kind of like hard skill areas like graphic design, video editing, podcast editing, music production, business analytics, marketing, productivity. You get the picture. There's a lot of different topics on there. And in that productivity category, there are actually 2 courses from yours truly. One is on building a to-do list, a calendar, a whole productivity system, if you will. And that consists of, again, your to-do list, your calendar, your note-taking system, your file management system. This class is all about making these tools act harmoniously and building systems and habits that help you to keep them from taking on what I like to call entropy, which is essentially just chaos. A lot of times we see a lot of chaotic things happening with our to-do list systems and our note-taking systems, and we stop using them. And when you stop using an external system, you stop trusting it, you start trusting your brain, and that is when you get in trouble because your brain is for having ideas, it is not for holding them, as David Allen once said. So if you can learn to keep these systems in working order long term, you're going to have a lot better time. So that class is going to be very useful for a lot of you, and I have one more class on how to build strong habits. And if you want to check both of those out, you can actually take them for free by going over to Skillshare.com/geek and signing up. When you do that, you're going to get a 2-month free trial of Skillshare with completely unlimited access to the platform. So you can take both my classes, and if you're particularly ambitious, you can take a lot of the other classes on the platform as well. And once that trial ends, Skillshare is also just a very affordable platform all around, especially when compared to a lot of other online learning platforms. Their plans start at less than $10 a month. So once again, head over to Skillshare.com/geek, sign up, get that 2-month free trial, and support our show. Big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this show, and another big thanks goes out to our second sponsor this week, which is Hover. Hover is the best place on the internet to get your hands on a domain name. I know at a certain point later on in this podcast, we talk about someone's question on whether they should write a book or start a blog first, and spoilers, my answer to that is start a blog first in most cases if you're writing nonfiction content. And whether you want to start a blog or you just want to start a personal portfolio where you can show off your work and hopefully get a job, you're going to need a website, and the number one first thing you need for a website is a domain name. Hover is the best place on the internet to get your hands on a domain name, not least of which because they have a very friction-free, convenient checkout process. I have been buying domains since I was, I think, 12 years old. And I've gone through a lot of domain registrars. A lot of them are very annoying. They have pop-ups. They have all these upsells. They try to extract as much money as possible once you've selected the domain name with its initial low price. It's very annoying, and Hover has none of that. You select the domain name, Whois protection is included for free, which is great, and you can get a domain name in less than 30 seconds if you have an account, which I do. So sometimes I'll buy a domain and I'm like, wow, I have a domain name already. That was quick. Like thomas.lol. That's a domain name that I actually own. They actually have over 400 domain name extensions ranging from your classic .coms and your .me's to more fun ones like .lol, .ninja, .limo. I don't know if I'd have a reason for a .limo domain, though there is another podcast out there that uses a .limo domain. It might be one of the Gimlet podcasts. I can't remember. But yeah, you could get that. And once you have your domain name, they have a couple of other cool features. You can easily connect an email address up to that domain. So you could have something like thomas@collegeinfogeek.com, which is a little bit more professional than a Gmail or a Yahoo. And you can also use their connect feature to connect that domain up very easily to online website builders and even online store builders. So if you're ready to snatch up your domain name, whether it be a personal website domain name or a cool blog you're wanting to build, you're going to want to do that before somebody else can grab it and make it unavailable available to you. And to do that, go over to hover.com/CIG. That is HOVER.com/CIG to get 10% off your first order. Once again, hover.com/CIG. And a big thanks goes out to Hover once again for sponsoring this episode and supporting our show. Let's get back into it. But yeah, like cats are great. I have a cat. I don't have a dog. I love cats. You don't really have to do as much to take care of them. So there is less of that like purpose-giving nature to getting a cat.
Oh, not true, because they're like 1,000 times more adorable, Tom.
They are.
And I know I'm opening myself up to a lot of hate here, but the adorable is the purpose.
They are super adorable.
Look at that.
I still am
keep the cute
unsure
alive.
if I think dogs or cats are the cutest. I don't know.
I'm not going to step any further into that trap than I already have.
The cute versus effort ratio is definitely skewed.
If you were
cat's
trying
favor.
to profit in cute versus effort, then yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely skewed in the favor
cat
of
will
cats.
probably win every time there. Anyway, this is not an episode where I try to invite dog lovers to hate me. The point is that I think when faced with difficult decisions in life, it might be a better idea to consider the long-term or short-term negatives. So, like, let's say you wanted to move anywhere in the country. You love Disney World, but you hate humidity. Obviously, you should put the humidity at a much higher consideration than Disney World.
That's fair.
Because you will get over the excitement.
Yeah.
Or
But you will deal with the humidity every day.
Yeah. Or similarly, predicting future regrets is actually a pretty good way of making decisions, I think.
This is my big issue with the idea of moving to the Northwest, which I think is the most beautiful part of this country.
It is fantastic.
And I won't lie, I like the level of humidity there more. I don't mind the dryness here. I can deal with it. I know like it's you don't like it a lot, but I can deal with it. I don't like the humidity of the Midwest where I grew up. But Seattle has like this really happy medium, and then it has the coast and everything. It's gorgeous. I love the water. I love the nature. I don't know how the gray would affect me, because that would be a pretty long-term, like especially in the winter, is almost an everyday thing.
Yeah, and you'd have to know that you're okay with that downside because the upside won't make up for it.
And I know like there's a lot here in Denver that I love. I have mountains here. There's not a lot of water, but I can go to the reservoir if I want to. There's a lot of things where it's like, in considering moving to a place like Seattle, I think of the things that I could do as like, fun short-term things. Like, oh, I could go to the lake. Oh, I could go hiking in the woods. I can go walk by the pier. That's awesome. But like, what do I do in an average day? I don't go to the mountains every day here.
No, you're gonna work.
I work.
You're gonna go to a coffee shop in non-pandemic times. You're gonna do normal stuff. So the question is, which negatives do you dislike the least?
Yeah,
during a normal day.
And I know myself, like I will add things to my plate, like hobby-wise, that will cut into anything where I could, take advantage of the natural beauty of where I live. I'll take vocal lessons. I'll like make music. I'll do, whatever, skateboarding, whatever it is. I could do that in either place. So it's like, okay, cool. A lot of my hobby time and what's the word for it? Recreational time is taken up with things that I could do in either place. So only a small percentage of it is going to be dedicated towards things I could exclusively experience in that place versus this place.
Yeah.
Is that worth the potential negatives? And for this, it's like a very tough problem because I literally don't know.
Well, you can't know. It's tough to know.
I just do know that like the days when I wake up and it's super gray outside, I'm like, oh.
Oh, see, I'm thrilled when I wake up and it's gray outside. So it's really just like mountain biking and rock climbing, all that stuff aside, because you would find adaptive outdoor things in almost any place. Mm-hmm. But really, for you, a better question is, do you prefer the downside of it being a little more dry than you'd like, or the downside of long-term grayness?
Yeah.
And that becomes, I think, a more useful measure than, whoa, I could climb the mountains. Guess what? I've been to the mountains a handful of times.
Yep.
They're cool. But most of the time I'm just working or doing normal. I'm not going to drive 2 hours out to the mountains every day. I'm just not going to do that. And if I did, I would get sick of the drive and it wouldn't matter. And I think this is important, is sort of predicting either the short-term things that will bother you the most and then comparing which annoyances you'd rather live with, or trying to predict for some decisions long-term regrets.
Yeah.
Like there's a quote from BoJack Horseman, which I haven't seen, but I saw the quote and it stuck with me. And it was, life is a series of closing doors, isn't it? And that terrifies me. It's very similar to a Sylvia Plath portion of a semi-autobiographical, I believe, book that she wrote, where she's looking up at this fig tree, and every fig is a different potential life. And as she's standing there trying to choose one, because you could only choose one, they begin to rot and fall, because the longer you spend trying to figure out the perfect positives, the more of them you just lose.
Yeah.
And I think a better way to look at it is, which things would I regret the most?
Yep.
You know, which ones will I be like, why didn't I ever do that? That one really meant something. All of these cool things over here, they're cool, but I think I could have justified to myself missing out on those.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
And it's like, it sounds sad to think of it that way, but I think that's an important way to make sure you don't have giant regrets. I would like to have the fewest regrets possible in life, just as a general rule. And you need to have these I think when making long-term decisions like that, if we're talking about moving, or if we're talking about career changes or having a family, predicting that regret might be useful, because there is some evidence that we over-predict regrets. And I think that small tendency to think things will be slightly worse than they actually end up feeling might spur you into action out of your comfort zone.
That's true, yeah.
Like right now, so if you're in a chapter in your life that you're not thrilled with, but you're okay with it, and you don't have a strong push, you might stay in it. Now, someday that chapter ends, regardless. If hypothetically I choose to end a chapter now, I know for certain there is a new one that awaits me. If I wait, this chapter still ends, but I cannot guarantee any new chapters.
Yeah.
I do not know. So you need something scary like regrets to motivate you. Otherwise, the daily life sort of just happens and you never find time. So thinking about the negatives is scarier, and therefore I think more useful, because we can live without many of the positives we want.
Yep. Tim Ferriss had an interesting point on this. Someone asked him, how do you deal with the anxiety caused by all the potential realities and lives that you're just letting go by making the choices you make? And his recommendation was read military strategy, because in war, you almost never have perfect information, but waiting is almost always the wrong answer. You have to use the information you have, make the best decision you can, and hope that the outcome is good, because the alternative is to wait and almost certainly lose your advantage.
Wait, guys, I don't have the perfect strat yet.
Exactly, yeah. You just have to use what you got. And if you think of life like that, like, I'm never going to have perfect information.
No.
Which means I never had a 100% guaranteed chance to pick the right door. And that means you really shouldn't regret the door that, you didn't pick in the past. You didn't have perfect information.
Yeah.
But what you should regret is not taking action, because that will hopefully spur you to take action in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I think regrets are going to feel worse when you do that. Regretting not doing something because I was scared to try anything, I think would hurt more than regretting not doing something because I chose an alternative. And I chose the alternative rather than sort of fell into it.
What are some of the things that you would regret not doing?
I'm unsure about this one still, but
Okay.
I think there's a decent possibility that I would regret never having kids.
Okay.
I don't know. I would regret never going to Japan, for sure. I would be very sad if every single year for the rest of my life I said, well, I don't really want to spend the money, or maybe my language skills aren't ready. Maybe I'm not ready. I would definitely regret being like, why didn't I just do it?
Yeah.
That would be something. That's a big thing. I don't know a lot of other terrible regrets at the moment. I think I would regret if I never spent at least a significant amount of time more in the Northwest. I don't know if that means I have to live there. A large part of me thinks that I still want to at some point. But I know that I would at least regret if I didn't have a semi-frequent ability to travel there.
Yeah. I see no reason why, long term you couldn't live there if that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I strongly lean toward it, but then I've got to weigh, would I regret being farther away from my family?
Yep.
Now, I've already lost some family, and it turns out that statistically, I'm very likely to only continue to do that as I get
turn
older.
out that way,
and
yeah.
my only escape route is if I get hit by a bus first. So obviously, I'm not banking on that. So the question is, would I regret being farther away from my family or not moving to the Midwest or the Northwest more?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a tough one. You know, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to gauge, and I'd have to think about it.
It's
But-
interesting because for most of human history, people didn't have this choice.
No,
Like,
and it's
you
weird to
just-
even have the choice to pick where you want to live.
Yeah. You grow up and you grow old in the place roughly where you were born, most likely.
Yeah, or you go out west and try to strike gold, but you probably never see anybody else you ever knew again.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of have to. That was a big decision, I'm sure.
Yeah. And now it's interesting because there's like this half belief that you can have it all.
We all know it's
You know?
not true, but we all try to lie to ourselves and say, "But it's true for me."
Yeah, I can keep all my old friends and see my family often, and also go meet new friends, and
We
also
all
go
give
do all
up-
the things I wanted to do. And
We all have to give up much.
I think part of it is the sheer exposure you have to options. You know, the brain literally like rewires itself in response to learning about these options. I'm very fascinated to how the human mind adapts to its environment and to the things it's exposed to. Like, if you never knew the Northwest was a thing, you wouldn't want it. You know?
No.
When
If no one had ever told me it was a real thing, I'd be like, everything else I've experienced is fine, and I would pick different things.
in college, like, you had never really left Iowa for the
No.
most part.
Nope.
Maybe like going to Omaha every once in a while, but so I think if I remember correctly, like you had said, hey, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to France. Like, there's these places I want to go to, but there's nowhere really in the United States that's like drawing me particularly.
I didn't know anywhere in the United States that interested me. Mm-hmm. And even now, honestly, there are only like 4 places that interest me in the United States.
Yeah.
They're like Northwest, Minnesota, places in Colorado, and also Vermont recently seems pretty in my mind.
I was about to say like the Northeast. I think there's a lot you don't know about it,
but
you
like
wanna
I
check it
don't
out.
know enough about any other state to care.
What about like the party district
Doesn't
of Miami?
mean they're. I don't want that. And it doesn't mean they're bad. But if you were to ask me one single fact about Arkansas, I would say it's not pronounced like Kansas.
That's true. America Explain.
That's
If you were to
That's
ask
it.
me one single fact about Arkansas, number 1, the band Outline Colors from there, and they're dope. And number 2, apparently there's really good mountain biking trails there, so I would love to go.
See, there's a thing, and I couldn't know that. Mm-hmm. And now I personally still don't care. But you don't.
I can see why
you
mountain
can't
biking
know-
trails and a
I didn't have a
post-hardcore
great
band.
first experience, but you definitely adapt your expectations. If you were like some surf farmer in the 1700s, you wouldn't be like, "Oh, I wish I was an astronaut."
Surfer farmer?
No, like if you were like a surf,
Like surfing
like yeah, you surf
while farming.
You put the net in your hands and you surf, and you catch fish.
So a fisherman.
No, you're farming the
Surf
fish. This is
farmer.
actually farmed fish. You're in the fish container and you're surfing with
Okay.
the automatic wave machine,
Right. It's okay.
which you installed for reasons.
I'm now going to call fishermen surf farmers.
Yeah, something like that. But you wouldn't be mad that you weren't an astronaut. You would have accepted this is it. This is my possibilities, and I will
Yeah.
do my best within them.
Yeah. There was, man, what book was I reading where all this, I learned about it. I can't remember, but when the Soviet Union was forming, they would send these researchers out to remote villages to try to educate them and get them like hooked into the system they were trying to build up. And it was really interesting, like the super remote villages that had basically no contact with the big cities, the people there thought totally different than people who had been connected to the big cities. And the most interesting way, I think this was in the book Range, the most interesting thing to me was they couldn't really think conceptually. Like if you were like, here's a group of 4 things, a deer, a bear, or no, it was like a deer, an arrow, a bow, and a frying pan. Like, what doesn't belong? And somebody who lived in a modern society would be like, well, the deer is an animal, it's living, so that doesn't belong. But also, like, the frying pan doesn't belong because, like, the deer and the bow and the arrow, like, that's hunting the deer. The people who live in these remote villages are like, they're all part of the same thing. Like, you got to cook it, you have to hunt it, the deer has to be there, you can't separate anything. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean,
I literally couldn't think of it.
That makes sense to me, though. It makes sense that you would be like, my conception of this is that your question is dumb.
Yep.
Because in no situation would I not need all four.
Yeah, that's how they, apparently, according to the book, that's how they responded. Like, this question doesn't make any sense. They couldn't think of conceptual groupings because they hadn't been exposed to that idea before.
Yeah, which part of the Pop-Tart doesn't belong, Tom? The frosting, the crust, the inside, or the toaster? Which one doesn't belong?
You got to have them all.
Wrong. If you can't toast the Pop-Tart, why would you? Yeah, exactly. All four are part of the important same group.
That actually might be a better example of, like,
obviously
how
you could be like, well, the
ridiculous
toaster's not part of a Pop-Tart, so it doesn't belong. But
that's
wrong,
what it was like.
But
yeah.
wrong, it does belong because you need to toast it.
Yep. It was kind of like
Unless
that.
it's one of the ones that tastes better frozen.
And it's like, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know, but it's like it's not like we're somehow fundamentally different from humans that were born back in, like, the Stone Ages or the Roman times or whatever. We're the same biologically. It's just the ideas that we're exposed to, the systems, the societies, they change our brains.
Yeah.
They change our conception of how life should work. And
We're
they make
just
us think
adapting
in
to
different ways.
what we're supposed to be doing. And it's like, I think that's important to remember, just because a lot of people will assume that people from the olden days were just, like, universally super dumb. And of course they thought that cheese summoned rats, because they were just a bunch of idiots. Well, they're not that different. They were just at different stages. And there were a lot of really intelligent things happening.
Yeah.
That you just don't get credit because we assume we must be the smartest automatically.
Yep.
But we're not that far away.
Well, it's just like that thing we were talking about where people assume that they have done more work, and the everyone's collective assumptions end up being more than 100% when added together. We are living in the now when we see the products of technological progress and everything, and we think we must be smarter.
Yeah.
And maybe we are smarter in certain ways. Maybe we have a deeper knowledge of certain things, but we're not actually smarter.
Yeah, like if you gave the same information and time and stuff.
Yeah, the ability of a baby born in the Roman times to learn, you suck them through a time vortex and you put them in today's times.
Time to adopt past babies.
They would learn just as well as we would.
Yeah.
A really interesting thing to think about, kind of like a terrifying thing to think about, is in Dan Carlin's podcast, Hardcore History, he talks about, like, people back then, they weren't a different species. They're humans, which means you're largely a product of the society in which you were brought up. And that means if you were born in Roman times, there's a high likelihood that you would think nothing of going to the gladiatorial games and watching people kill each other.
Yeah, you may have been desensitized to it. And if you didn't like it, it would have been harder for you to speak out in that environment.
Yep.
And or you wouldn't have been taken seriously.
Now, I would love to not go back, but I would love to be able to observe for myself how things actually were. Like, were there a lot of people who were against that? Because I think, like, popular culture has this assumption that back in Roman times, like, the general populace loved the gladiatorial games and thought nothing of, like, wanton murder in an arena. I have to wonder if there were actually a lot of people who were like, I don't like that, I don't go in for that.
Yeah, winners write the rule books, and they weren't in power, clearly, so...
But what we do know is that there was a gigantic coliseum with a heck of a lot of seating.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like everyone was like, nope, I don't like that. Like, they were filling those seats. So, and there's a lot of records about it.
Yeah.
So it's weird to think of. And I love making little observations about this. Like, oh, hey, people getting so excited for their football teams. It's just like a manifestation of tribalism.
Yeah.
One's football team, especially for, like, the ones where you live in the city where the football team is, like, that's just part of your identity, your group identity. So the people who don't understand, like, why do you care about football? Why do you get so excited? Like, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, it's
like
it's
part
actually
of your group identity.
Pretty natural thing for people.
Yeah, it's very natural. And it's very natural to tie some of your own self-worth into the performance of that group. That's why people feel great when their team wins. So you didn't really do anything, but you feel great because you feel like you were part of it.
To take this back to the main episode topic, one tip, don't move somewhere where the team sucks because you will become attached to it, and then you will hurt every time you lose. Unless you want to be one of the ironic fans who's like, yeah, I know they suck, but I love them anyway.
A lot of people are like that.
I mean, I guess you have to embrace it at that point, right? Otherwise, it's.
I mean, let's be honest. The Kansas City Chiefs were, for most of my life, they were never that great. But I never
if you're
abandoned
assuming
them.
that you need to be the best or the worst, most teams have to not be the best. So everybody's going to have to be an apologist for their team to some degree.
There's another thing where it's like, if you're not part of where the best team is, which I think historically is usually like the Patriots. Well, then everyone loves to just like pile up on hating the Patriots. We can all agree on not liking the Patriots.
Yeah.
You know, and like to be clear, I don't really have a dog in this fight. And I would push back on your tip for people who don't care about sports because I live in Denver.
Oh, no, it definitely doesn't apply if you don't care about sports.
I do not know how well the Rockies have done. I don't know how well the Broncos have done. I do know they won the Super Bowl like some number of years ago.
That's
not
cool.
that long ago. Do we have a basketball team? The Denver Nuggets. I don't know. I don't know how well
I
they
didn't
did.
actually know the answer to that question.
The one I don't know the answer to is, do we have a professional hockey team? I assume we must.
I think so.
It's like Denver, you think.
Is it the Avalanche? Is it the Denver Avalanche?
That must be it.
I thought we had one.
I couldn't remember if Avalanche is one of those like Iowa teams.
I'm not 100% sure it's true. I've liked hockey in the past, so I'm vaguely hockey aware, but I'm not very hockey aware.
Hockey's probably the one I would choose to watch out of all four of those.
Yeah, I like hockey and soccer because they're kind of similar, just on grass or ice.
They're really dynamic.
Like the board setup, at least.
Yeah.
Pretty similar from a watcher's perspective.
And then I would watch basketball, and then I would watch baseball, and then football last.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just find football very boring to watch.
I don't know.
I try every Super Bowl. I get invited to a party. I'm like, I'm going to watch this time. I'm going to be part of it. And I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, look, Tom Brady threw a thing. And then a guy crossed the line, and there was a bunch of other guys, and they piled on him.
What are you going to do?
Woo.
I guess whichever one happens to speak to you, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess before we get into the reader questions, or the listener questions that I always call reader questions.
The cult member questions.
Cult member questions.
Get it
right. The last thing I would want to say is that I was talking about long-term regrets, but you could also use the avoidance of negative things to improve your daily life, which I think is very good for underlying stress levels.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, myself included, most of the time have like this level of underlying anxiety and stress that never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So simple things like Ashley and I split chores based on which one we dislike most. I hate folding clothes. She doesn't want to carry laundry up and down the stairs. Or I don't like baking or boiling because it's boring, but she doesn't want to work with fancy knife work. So we split and do the part that the other like dislikes more, but we dislike less. And then it doesn't really matter if I'm not excited to bring laundry up and down the stairs, but I'm taking a negative away from her life. And if she folds it, she's taking a negative away from me. That's a small help.
Ooh, we had our money example earlier. You know, like taking away a commute is the same in terms of happiness as adding 40 grand apparently in salary. Take that logic one step further and ask yourself, would I miss $50 a month to not mow my lawn?
Yeah, you're removing a negative. If you really hate the lawn, that may be a good thing to optimize for, and you're probably giving somebody else a job by default. That's pretty useful.
That's how I think, because I've had people be like, oh, you're so lazy for not mowing your own lawn. You're so lazy for not doing XYZ domestic work thing. It's like, no, because there are people who want to do that job, or at least are willing to do that job, and I'm willing to pay for it. So they get to make money.
Yeah, and you get to remove a little bit of a negative at the cost of money, where if it's small enough amount, you'd be like, the negative of losing that money doesn't matter, but the negative of mowing is really obnoxious, and I don't want to do it ever.
Mm-hmm. I had a heck of a lot of friends who went out every weekend during college, and they'd spend $50 a weekend just like going to bars.
Yeah.
And there's not like a societal, looking down upon that kind of behavior. Maybe there's a little bit, but I haven't seen
Depends on your sector.
I haven't seen people act as disgusted towards that as they do towards paying for people to come do your housework for
There's
you.
definitely some sort of aren't we fancy kind of an assumption. I think in there it's like
It's a very American thing too, I think. Like I've had
it is weird
people
that it's
who live
different
in
than
like
paying
Asian
for other
countries and
things.
they're like, we have a maid and it's super normal and we aren't an upper class family, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like here in the US, maybe paying for a full-time maid or a nanny or whatever it is would be pretty expensive. But the whole idea is just, it seems like it's looked down upon and I just don't get it.
Yeah, I assume it's more of a stop rubbing your money in my face sort of a situation if it's assumed that task is expensive.
Yeah.
Like la-di-da, I can afford somebody to do my laundry or something. But in the end, it's actually fairly similar to paying for anything else, like pre-made food. That's just you paying that's you paying a chef. Is it a McDonald's chef? Maybe, but you're still paying someone to do something you could have done yourself.
Or if you bought a slightly nicer car, the difference in monthly payment, if you financed it, might be the exact same as if you had bought a more modest car and you're like, hey, I don't want to mow my lawn.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
I guess along that lines, you get double points if you swap out a negative for a positive. So a commute for a bike ride, it might be a longer commute in Denver, depending on where you're going. It can actually be the same commute.
Yeah. That's a good point.
But a bike ride would be positive for me, and driving through rush hour traffic would be a negative. So if I swap those out, guaranteed my quality of life has just risen a lot.
Yeah, I think it would be good to ask yourself, like, what is the negative element of this thing that I don't like? Is it the fact that I have a commute? Is it the fact that I have to leave my house and go somewhere? Or is it I hate sitting in my car in bumper-to-bumper traffic?
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then, like, you're right. A 40-minute bike ride every day could be awesome. I love riding my bike.
I would prefer a 40-minute bike ride to, like, a 30-minute drive. Mm-hmm. If I had to pick, I would definitely do a bike.
Yeah.
Unless it was winter, in which case the negative of biking in the cold far surpasses the traffic.
That's not great, you know. But yeah,
Shout out to all the Minnesotans that do it anyway.
they do. They get the fat bikes, the big tires, and they ride in the snow. And they
I'm
don't care.
impressed, and may I learn their secrets someday by studying them.
I grew up having to do it.
I did it in Iowa a little bit.
My school was
Just sometimes.
1.99 miles away from my house, and you had to live 2 miles away.
I wasn't as much of a baby back as like at that age though. Like now I'm like, oh, it's cold. I don't want to.
Yeah,
You know, but
you
as
don't
a kid,
have to.
as a
now.
kid, I played in the snow, and now I'm like, oh, it's because of the choice.
I still play in the snow. I just pay a lot of money to Vail Resorts, and I go up on a mountain and bring skis.
Oh yeah, well, I'm gonna make snow angels, and I'm gonna save a bunch of money.
That's
So
true. You will
what's
save
up?
a bunch of money doing that. That's fair. But yeah, like look at how you can maybe tweak what you're doing. You don't have to remove the commute. Maybe you could make it a bike ride.
Yeah, maybe you can't. Moving closer to your job is obviously harder.
Or like, I
than
don't know.
just, changing it.
I'm at
commute.
another point in my life where I don't want to cook, but I spent my whole life thinking I really don't like to cook. And then for a while I got really into cooking and I loved it. So I think some things may be perceived as a negative, but maybe there's something you could do to change the way you view it.
Yeah.
Maybe do like a challenge, like, okay, well, why do I not like cooking? Because I cook the same old crap every night and it's not that great and there's still a bunch of cleanup. Well, try some new recipes.
Well, I mean, that's what Ashley and I are hoping to do, because I want to do the fancy knife work and the prepping of really specific things. But I just hate waiting. I don't want to boil I just don't care about boiling pasta or about any of the things that are just put it in. Mm-hmm. Pay attention, I guess.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't want to do that. That kills cooking for me.
One more thing I want to mention on this is you had talked about this, I think, when you mentioned like asking yourself what you're going to regret later in life.
Yeah.
It may be worth accepting some annoying things in your life in the short term if you have a dream that requires accepting those.
I had a dream once.
You know, like you want to go work in the publishing industry, you need to move to New York City and you got to live with 4 roommates for a while. And that sucks because one of them is really annoying and stays up playing WoW all night.
But
Suck
the
it up.
long-term negative of regretting.
Yep.
Never
Because you're
getting
going to
into that
regret not
industry.
trying. Right?
Yeah.
So do it.
And because when you look in the past, negatives aren't as strong as they were. You look back with like rose-tinted glasses.
Yeah.
So the short-term negatives, as long as they were for a long-term positive, well,
Yeah, it's just so yeah. Maybe you don't
that one's gonna be okay.
maybe you don't accept negatives in your life that are just there because they're there for no real reason, or because you think you need something, like you think you need a certain amount of money or something like that. But if there's something you want to do, go do it.
Like a really intrinsic positive that you're working for.
Yeah.
Rather than something like money's always the obvious example, but that one won't pay off the same way as your dreams, obviously. I don't think I'm going to look back
here's a
and
good
be
example.
like, I wish I had earned another $100,000 on top of whatever it is I earned in my life. My one regret.
I mean, like, so my last year in Iowa, I was really into figure skating. And the only time I could take lessons was at 7 a.m. at the latest. I also had the option of doing 6 a.m. That was it. I don't like going to bed super early. I don't like waking up super early, but I did it because I was willing to make the sacrifice. So there's a non-money example.
Yeah.
You know, would I have rather taken the lessons at like 9 a.m., got up, made breakfast? Yeah, but that's not my option.
Yeah. Which negative do you hate the most? Missing out on this opportunity entirely.
Exactly. Yep. All right, let's get into some cult member questions.
Cult member questions. Let's see. All right, you got these questions too, right?
Oh, I do?
They're on Notion, I think. I'll ask the first one. Here we go. First one. I'm working on my resume after seeing a job post for a podcast producer. Now, even though I produce and host a podcast from time to time, and it relates to the job, I'm unsure if I should include it on my resume since it's a hobby. Should I add it anyway?
Would you be willing to talk about it in an interview with pride?
That's a solid answer.
That's my barometer.
If it's like a super embarrassing podcast about niche anime and you're only going to get flustered and ruin your interview if you talk about it, yeah, probably don't include it.
Yeah,
unless you're proud of it.
I run Bronycast.
I mean, I guess it depends on what you're applying for, what podcast it is. But that's
true.
That's a good barometer right there.
Yeah, so is the hobby side project you're working on, what is it going to look like to the interviewer? You know? Because, I don't know, let's just say you're running like a podcast about fetishes or something. Maybe that's not going to do so well if you're like applying to be a podcast producer for a bank or something like that. I don't know.
And you probably don't want to put, I host a podcast, but not name it, because then they'll be like, oh, what kind of podcast? And you'll be like,
don't worry. I don't actually host a podcast.
Can we just say I lied on my resume? Let's just go with that.
I don't want to tell you what it is.
Let's just go with that. Then maybe don't at that point.
Yeah, so like you have to ask yourself, like, how is it going to be perceived? But the fact that it is a hobby is not going to make it look illegitimate. Like, just the fact that it's a hobby you're not being paid for. CIG started as a hobby.
I listed projects on my resume. I had a language skills section. I wanted that stuff on there because it would make me stand out and therefore be slightly more memorable.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but also I would have been proud to talk about any of those things.
Yeah, I feel like podcasting, being a YouTuber, being a blogger, being a photographer, videographer, a ton of these things that are legitimate careers, people who get into them almost invariably start out as hobbyists. No one's gonna... I've never picked up a camera before. Will you pay me to take photos of your wedding? No.
Yeah, I don't... It's like my fifth one. I don't care at this point.
You know, so if I'm getting married, which I am, and I'm trying to hire a photographer, and I'm considering somebody who has never done professional photography work before, I don't know if I would, but just to say I was, I'm probably going to be like, well, show me some of your hobbyist work. I'm sure as hell going to want to see that over just like, just nothing. Yeah. Just show me nothing.
And especially list it if it's somewhat relevant. Like if I were applying for that position, I'd be like, look at all these macro bugs, and you'd be like, there aren't going to be a lot of those at the wedding. Actually,
technically there will be. It's an outdoor wedding.
We're not planning on specifically focusing on the arthropod guests. And I'll be like, oh, then listing it isn't really that helpful.
Yeah, if I was you and I was trying to get a wedding photography gig, I would probably you've done a few portraits. You did a picture of me.
Occasionally, yeah.
I would still include a couple of the macro things because those are interesting. Those are going to start a conversation.
Yeah, but as long as I also have the other skills.
Yes. So when you're trying to get a job, you need to put together a resume and a portfolio that is going to tell the person that's making the decision you have the requisite skills and experience to do the work, but it also has to get their attention. I think we've done episodes on study abroad. I'm not sure if you've been on them. I've done episodes with people
Probably
like in
not,
the past,
considering
guests.
I didn't.
And I think I remember doing an episode about the value of study abroad, and the guest I was talking to, one of their points was, I've been in interviews where I've listed my study abroad experience on my resume, and it becomes a point of conversation, like, oh, what was Sweden like? And that makes you memorable. It's not like going to replace experience that they're looking for, but it makes you more memorable. And if you're on a short list with people who have that experience but aren't memorable, you might be the one who gets picked.
Yeah, hobbies and side projects and things like that are definitely good to add as they're like the frosting on top of your delightful cake resume. I assume the resume is actually a cake because this is nonsense meme world.
If you're applying to be
these
on
days.
Cake Boss, your
And
resume
I
better
don't
be a cake.
understand the internet anymore. We've gone too far.
Every day we stray a little further from God's light.
Yeah, essentially, in a nutshell.
But this is the thing I love about podcasting, video creation, blogging, any kind of creative work. There are legitimate opportunities to build a career in all these areas that are only getting stronger as more and more businesses realize that content is the best marketing you can get. Give us videos, give us podcasts, give us blogs, give us all that you can give us. But no one has to give you permission to start doing them.
Yeah.
There's no permission required to start a YouTube channel, to start a podcast, to start a blog, none of it. And that is where you're going to get your first bits of experience. That's where you build the foundation. And I would say, like, if it is your intention to build a career in this area, treat your hobby seriously. Every single week you make a podcast. How can I make this better? Let me watch this YouTube video on compression and EQ so I can make the sound better. Let me learn, what RSS actually is. So if there's like a bug in my feed, I can troubleshoot it myself, and I know how to troubleshoot code on there. Let me learn how to build a basic website so I can host my podcast. Let me build all these little sub skills that sort of support the main skill. All of a sudden, a couple of years from now, you realize I've got like this really great, versatile, deep skill set in this area that I thought was a hobby, and I can talk about it at length in an interview.
Yeah.
So absolutely. If you would be willing and not embarrassed to talk about it in an interview, list it on the resume. And that also goes for like skills and software. Like I've seen a lot of people, they're like, what should I list in my skill section? Well, I have opened Excel once. Can I put Excel?
What happens if they ask you about it? Yeah.
Yeah. What's a pivot table? Oh, don't put it on there.
Table to pivots.
All right. I started writing a series of articles with a common theme. Right now, it's about 8,000 words, and I don't even think I'm halfway done yet. So 8,000 words across the whole series, I guess?
Yeah, I would assume.
Okay. Let's see here. Do you recommend starting a blog, forming an audience, and then releasing a book? Or would you write a book to gain an audience to then start a blog? Start a blog. If you want to do both, why not?
Yeah.
Cost of entry is so low, and a book in itself is incredibly difficult to market.
It would be easier to market with an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you've proven stamina if you do a blog. You've proven that you're willing to go very long term with it. There's
a reason why publishers reject 99% of the pitches they get. And there's several reasons. A lot of the book pitches are just bad, or they're not paranormal teen romance or whatever is popular right now.
It's the only genre.
But, and this is especially true in nonfiction, many publishers reject a book because the author does not have a platform to market that book. So, and this is why, like, a lot of times, the book you pitch, especially in nonfiction, is not always that important. Like, your ability to write amazingly, not always super important from what I've been told by agencies and by people who have done this, pitched books themselves, it's more, how well are you going to be able to sell this book for us?
It is unfortunate that marketing ability kind of supersedes skill in many areas in a money-making world.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's unfortunate because it's just business.
It's just kind of how capitalism works. And you can not like that all you want. I don't think it's great, but it is still the framework we're working within at the moment. So if you want to sell a book, marketing ability is going to help it.
That's just how it works.
Yeah.
It's like pop versus jazz. You know, I think even well-known pop musicians would not hesitate to say, yeah, jazz musicians, especially at the top of jazz, are infinitely more talented and proficient musicians than we are. But part of the reason that we're bigger is because of that. Because they care so much about, you know, going through the Coltrane changes and having like 18 different keys and rolling D&D dice to figure out the time signature of the song.
Yeah.
The average population or the average person doesn't care about that. They want to listen to standard 4/4 pop number that they can dance to. And turns out it's not that difficult to produce something like that, at least when compared to like learning how to play a Coltrane song or something. The artistic merit, the difficulty, the pros, all these things, they kind of play second fiddle to how big is your platform and how aligned is what you're writing to what the market wants. And the problem with a book is if you don't have a platform, a book in itself is not super easily shareable or digestible in short bursts. And that's kind of what our society runs on
Your
in terms
book
of
can't
like how
go
ideas
viral
spread.
as easily as a tweet.
Exactly. Now maybe you write something super amazing and a publisher picks you up and they're like, okay, this is gold, Jerry, and we're gonna put like all of our effort behind this. Record companies do this. They'll identify a certain talent and they'll be like, all right, we're gonna put a ton of effort into this one person. In fact, there's like a big thing in the recording industry where you can get signed, but they sign you with the intention to shelve you. They'll sign you, they'll snatch up the rights to your record, and they'll purposely never release it because you were too close and too similar to Justin Bieber, and they were trying to push Justin Bieber.
Wow.
That happens.
That's fun.
So, you know, but when we're talking about like, okay, book or blog first, build the blog because it's going to be hard to build an audience no matter what you do. But with a blog, Google's going to pick it up if you're targeting good keywords, if you're writing articles that people are searching for. You can share that very easily on social media. You can start to build an audience slowly over time, and then you can write a book for those people.
Yeah, that's a good point. You'd be building the audience as you wrote it, rather than hoping that, hey, I finished this, everyone notice, and then it's not going to work as well.
Yeah. Now, this person did not say if they're doing fiction or not, but they said a series of articles with a common theme. I would imagine that's nonfiction.
Yeah, I would assume nonfiction.
The cool thing is you could write a book using the articles as a starting point. Maybe don't. Well, you know what? Actually, I was about to say maybe don't like repackage the articles as a book, but people have done that with
I've
a
absolutely
lot of
seen
success.
it done.
Eliezer Yudkowsky did that with all of his Less Wrong articles, packaged it up into a book, and now it's on Amazon. Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income, his original big break was he was keeping a blog with all of his notes for the lead certification exam in architecture, and he just packaged them up as an ebook and sold it. Didn't deceive anybody. It's just like, look, this is what's on the blog, but I've packaged it up. I've made it easier to read. There's a table of contents.
It's in the right order.
I'm giving you curation. And a lot of people want that, you know?
Yeah.
Pick any book off the shelf, especially like a pop sci book or something at Barnes & Noble. There's like a series of blog posts or YouTube videos that will tell you the exact same information. A lot of times from the same author.
Yeah.
10 Steps to Earning Awesome Grades. Like at this point, there's not a lot in that book that's like unique to the book.
Just the structure is unique.
Mm-hmm. You know, in my case, that book was fairly unique compared to the blog content because I had never really focused on academics when I was blogging. As a student, I was more interested in entrepreneurship and personal finance. So I wrote the book as kind of like a way to force myself to finally get some academic success content on the blog. But now, like, I've done so many videos about test taking and studying and all that, like there's really very little left in the book that I haven't covered elsewhere.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop people from wanting the book anyway, because it is just like this nice curated thing.
It kind of also feels a little more official if it's in the book.
Yeah, and I always wonder, like, why? Why are books, why do they feel more official?
Gatekeeping.
Is it gatekeeping? Is it just tradition?
It's got to be gatekeeping, right?
Yeah.
Because this means somebody signed off on it, probably. Now, in this case,
Which
it's
is funny
funny because
nobody
it
did.
wasn't. That's not the case for this one.
Nobody
But that's
signed
like,
off on it.
That's like a modern thing. You assume
Yeah.
most books have been signed off on by someone else who is picky, and that makes you trust it a little more.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah, maybe.
anyone can write a blog, and you don't even know that anything they're saying is true.
Yep.
No one signed off on it. They could just buy a domain right now. It's super easy.
Barely an inconvenience. So yeah, start with a blog, I think.
I mean, it's worked out here.
Or hey, shoot your shot. Get an agent. Reach out to an agent. Say, hey, I've got this idea. What do you think of it?
Yeah, especially if you have a connection with an agent, that could work. But it does feel like the harder thing to start with.
I would start with a blog. There's just so much potential good there. You can build an online presence, build an audience, learn a thing or two about some of the tech stuff a little bit along the way, and you're going to develop a ton of content that you could remix into a book.
Yeah,
And it's never gonna hurt you. You know, and I think like the act of publishing on a schedule, that also helps too. A lot of people, they start a book, but they're not really like
that's
sharing
true.
it
The
out.
Publishing gives you a chance for extra discipline with an external measurement
I like that.
available.
Okay, so last one. How can I force myself to wake up at 4 a.m. consistently? Well, I guess my question is, why do you need to wake up at 4 a.m. consistently? Is it because Jocko Willink is doing it on Instagram and you feel guilty?
Yeah, 4 a.m. even seems a little... I wake up at 5 a.m. now.
Yeah.
But 4 a.m., that still just feels like nighttime to me. But
Yeah, that's night. I used to have to do it when I worked in the cornfields as a teenager. I would have to get up
I
at
was
4
thinking the
a.m.
military workout class.
That was a 6 a.m. class, so I would get up at about 5:15 for that.
Oh, okay.
When I
I
was
got
in high
nothing on the
school-
Huskers.
During the summers, I would work in the cornfields.
Detasselers.
And detasseling. That's what it was. You pull the tassel. See the tassel, feel the tassel, pull the tassel. It's not that complicated. That was my boss's everyday motto. Because a lot of people, they'd see the tassel, skip the tassel, get fired.
That's not good.
A lot of times. Especially when I worked my way up to being the field manager, I would have to wake up super early because I had to be to the bus before everyone else to do like roll call and get everything prepped. So I would wake up, I think it was 3:30 a.m. That one year, so I could be to the bus by 4:30 and then do roll call at 5. But here's the thing. You need 7 to 8 hours of sleep, maybe even more.
Yeah.
That is how you're going to be your happiest self, your most productive self. That's how you're going to get the most done. It may not be glamorous on social media to be like, yeah, I get up at 8 a.m. and I go to bed at midnight, but that's still 8 hours of sleep. And if you're getting up at 4 a.m., you need to go to bed at 8 p.m. to get the same amount of sleep.
There's not a lot of good ways to circumvent that.
Do you
unless
wanna
you
do
want to
that?
get a lot of negatives that you could have avoided, actually.
Yeah, you need the sleep. Polyphasic sleep doesn't work. No, let me rephrase that. Polyphasic sleep in the siesta form, where it's like I sleep 7 hours a night and then I maybe take an hour nap, 2 hour nap in the middle of the day, that can work. People do that. But the whole like, I'm going to take a 20-minute nap every 6 hours and I'll sleep it out. I'll sleep 2 hours total, but it's like a secret hack. Doesn't work.
Yeah, I can't say that it seems like it would do much other than make you incompatible with society, which is not great.
It does.
But
I can't go to that movie, guys. I got a nap in the middle of it.
yeah, but like
Unless
the answer
the
really
middle
is
of the movie's really boring, then I'll go.
it really is just to to go to bed earlier. I mean, I'm waking up at 5. I get super tired at 10 p.m. now. I go to bed at 10. I can't stay up really past then. I will pass out. I get very tired at 10 now.
Yeah.
You want to whenever this applies to a lot of things, not just sleep, but when you want a certain outcome, you should ask, what actions can I take where the outcome I want is the natural result? Rather than,
Right.
how can I force the outcome I want in spite of my actions.
Yeah.
That second one's not going to work for long term. You might force it for a week, but you're going to fall apart afterward. Make success the automatic and borderline inevitable result of what you do. So go to bed early, and you'll probably wake up earlier. That is just. It seems like that will obviously happen, so it's the easiest answer.
And that brings us to the tactical parts of this question.
Tactics.
You have 2 challenges now. Make yourself go to bed on time, which you do with a wind down routine.
Yeah, you gotta.
And I just made a video called the 1 hour night routine that you and Tony helped with. So go watch that. And then secondly, you have to make yourself get out of bed. The most effective method I have ever had, for getting out of bed on time has been an early flight. I will get up.
The cost.
I'm not going to miss my flight.
The cost to not getting up is great.
Close runner-ups would be that summer job in the cornfields. If you miss one day, you lose out on $100 bonus you get at the end of the season. I wasn't about to lose out on $100
pretty
just for missing a day.
Good strategy on the boss's behalf.
My boss Jeff had some good incentives, and he had to, because detasseling is a very hard job, and you hire like mostly high school like teenagers to do it, and a lot of high school teenagers don't have a lot of work ethic. They just don't.
Yeah, you need to come up with creative stuff.
I would love to be wrong here. I would love to be like, I'm just being an old curmudgeon who thinks that today's youth is not working hard. That's not where this comes from. This comes from having done detasseling for 5 years and like seeing 50% of the workforce quit in the first week because walking through cornfields for 7 hours a day pulling tassels is too much for them. That's just how it is. So knowing that, he had some pretty smart incentives. I think it was like, if you missed one day, you get a $50 bonus. If you miss no days, though, you get a $100 bonus. And if you miss only one day, you also get to go to a pool party at the end of the season, which is cool. He'd like rent out this entire pool in one of the suburbs.
Pretty fancy
it was
strategies.
Awesome, you know? And it paid pretty well. Like, it wasn't like the best paying job ever, but when you're 14 or 15 and it's paying like $8 an hour, you're not going to get that anywhere else unless you like taught yourself how to code or something and you did web development or something like that. But like working at the grocery store paid pretty much the same. But detasseling was great because it was like, all right, this is going to suck, but it's 8 hours a day for 3 weeks. And you could do that and just make a ton of money over the summer.
Yeah.
Or work like 2 hour after school shifts and make the same amount of money over an entire school year. So I gladly did it. So yeah, that job, the ROTC military class you had mentioned, that also got me out of bed. But if you don't have something where it's like, I have to wake up to get to a thing, maybe you want to have like time in the morning to take an online class or read a book or something. I no longer do my hardcore buffer tweet method.
Yeah.
We'll have that in the show notes. Check it out, theinforium.com/3. What I do now is I take this iPad and I set an alarm on it for like 3 minutes after my main alarm, and I keep this down in my office. So my main alarm goes off, and I'm like, I could hit snooze, but then I'm going to hear the iPad go off downstairs, and it's going to wake Anna up. I can't do that. I got to get up.
Oh, yeah.
And getting up, running down the stairs, turning the alarm off, at that point, like, the blood's flowing. I'm good.
Yeah, when I wake up these days, it's actually much, much surprisingly easier. I know it seems obvious, but I underestimate the value of water. If I just drink a glass of water first, most of that grogginess is just immediately gone, even more so than coffee might do. It's just the water tells my body it's on now. Don't go back to bed anymore.
Yeah, water, sunlight, movement. Get as many of those as you can to wake yourself up.
Yeah, and I've even done that. I've like had coffee first, and then it didn't do much, and I'm groggy still. Then I drink a full glass of water, and I'm like, I feel better. Weird. It's almost like my body was built using one of these things and using the other.
There's water and coffee though. But yeah, I think the caffeine takes a little while to metabolize anyway.
Yeah.
So I think people who get like the instant perk from coffee, it's just like the ritual. You kind of like
I do like
associate
rituals.
it. Rituals are pretty cool.
Cool sacrificial ones.
Dark Lord Rise.
Altars, stuff like that. Also, one thing I did for my alarm, similar to what you're doing. My first alarm is a song that I really pleasantly wake up to. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's a great mood. I'm motivated to wake up today. The latest alarm in a series of alarms will not be a pleasant song. It will be a loud, obnoxious, non-peaceful song. Which
is it the Quiznos subs commercial?
I don't even know that commercial. What's a,
with the puppets that are
TV?
yelling Quiznos subs?
I don't know that one, but it's actually usually I would set it to this super loud and obnoxious like anime song, and it's like I like the song, but it's not my morning vibe. It totally ruins what I'm going for, so I have to avoid it happening to ruin the beautiful peace I awoke with.
Okay, I have a recommendation.
It's like a
for
reward
people.
followed by removing the reward.
Okay, so along these lines, I'm going to recommend the song "Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste" by Norma Jean as your final alarm.
Oh, okay.
that just wake up to that. You're gonna be awake.
There it is. Pro tips.
Immediately being woken up by a tortured scream over horrendous guitars.
I would be really annoyed laying in bed to hear that after I had just heard something that was like a peaceful, like good thing, and then just ruin that.
I'm gonna raise
I don't want it.
boombox up to your window. 4 a.m. That's how you're gonna get up at 4 a.m.
That's not nearly as romantic as most boomboxes to windows are.
No.
It's a different vibe.
But you know what? There's a girl out there who would love that. She would find it romantic.
Well, you need
somewhere
to just
in
try.
the world.
You need to try every house until you find her.
Or until the cops arrest me for breaking the noise ordinance.
One per neighborhood.
I think there's probably a specific sub-ordinance for blasting deathcore through people's windows at 4 a.m.
I'm looking for my soulmate. Leave me alone.
I just want a girl who really likes the first Norma Jean album. Give me a break. Is romance dead? Okay. So, all right, those are our cult member questions. Send us more. Either the Inforium on Instagram.
That is true.
We also have a comment section on the YouTube channel, so feel free to put questions there. Or I am Tom Frankly, or you are Yo Bartholomew on Instagram or Twitter.
Yep.
I think the best place we get questions is when I make a story on Instagram and I ask for questions there because it's so easy.
Then they're all
type
collected.
them in.
Yeah, I've had success there too, but I'm not going to do that often.
Like I asked for questions about how to build a YouTube channel.
More often, I don't know.
I asked for questions about how to build a YouTube channel because it's our next episode, and I got a bunch about that. But I also got how do I become a professional bodybuilder, and I got another one called it was listed as I am from Tajikistan, which I'm struggling to find the question in that, but I did get it.
There was also how to build bicep like Matt.
How to build bicep like Matt,
and that's a good question.
One does not simply build biceps like Matt. Well, step one.
He actually stole those from other
super,
people.
He does. He absorbs their power. If he deems you not minimalist enough, he absorbs your bicep power and leaves you with nothing.
Yeah.
Which is, ironically, the most minimalist thing you can have.
I've cured you of your maximalist nature. I have taken your things.
That's true. If Matt were truly a minimalist...
That's a really cool minimalist villain idea. I robbed you, but I left you with the necessities. You're happier now.
Rejoice. Rejoice, child. You've been purged.
I want this comic.
If Matt were truly a minimalist, would he need such big biceps?
He takes that burden to help the others who needed them removed. It is a tough burden to own all of your things, but I will take it to give you happiness.
I do have 4 ATVs and 6 cars, but it's not because I want them. No, I am a minimalist.
I am stressed by their very presence.
I had to take them, and I must use them. Otherwise, they shall go to waste, which is even worse.
There's a really good charlatan opportunity here.
I love it. Okay, we're going to end this podcast so we can record the next one, because we do things in batches sometimes. If you want the show notes for this episode, they're going to be over at theinforium.com/3, right?
Yes, indeed.
Cool. So check those out. I know we linked to some things, or I mentioned some things, and then Jeremy will link to them. I didn't link to them. And you can subscribe if you haven't done so already. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all kinds of other cool things. So go over to theinforium.com and click whichever button your heart desires. I've been listening on Spotify recently.
That's fair.
It's a good podcast player.
It's a good place to listen to stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
already
YouTube
there.
as well. I still need to change the YouTube URL.
This is true.
I'm waiting for YouTube to get back to me to see if they can somehow let me keep the old one. I don't know if it's going to be possible. So what I might have to do, if it's not possible, I may have to start a new channel and get the URL
Yeah.
onto that one, the old URL. And I'll have to like ask people to subscribe to it because I think you need 100 subscribers.
Yep. Pretty sure
And
that's
then
still
it'll just
true.
be like a video like, hey, this is not the URL anymore. It's janky. I don't like it. I wish we could just do a redirect.
I don't like.
Getting in touch with YouTube though, even when you have 2 million subscribers, not always easy. It does seem like you have to just like angrily tweet at them half the time. But that's how it is. If you want to support the show, we are on Apple Podcasts, which has a rating and review system. So ratings and reviews are always appreciated, or you can just share this with a friend. But as always, we appreciate you just hanging out with us and listening to the end of these episodes, which are always lengthier than we anticipate.
Every time.
So I'm going to go ahead and end this episode, and we will see you in the next one. Stay cute.